Greetings. I'm excited to share this bonus content with you where we're diving into how to claim Social Security benefits if you're an individual filer, how to make sense of when the best time might be to claim. Now, I am not with the Social Security Administration. I'm not speaking to your specific situation, but I hope that you can find this content to be valuable and educational in nature. As we think about this, there's really two elements of this decision. The first is the mathematics of it. If you know the time that you're going to die, then we can make the mathematics really, really straightforward. The second is a psychological component that even if we know the math, even if we knew exactly when you're going to pass away and those income streams and the different options, there's still a psychological component that we have to grapple with. So first, I want to touch on that mathematical element of this. As a reminder, we did a video that was an overview video that gets into the basics of Social Security, how the benefits calculated, and some of the other specifics in there. We won't touch on those today. Feel free to go back to that core content to review that before you watch this video. As a quick reminder, you can claim benefits on your own earnings history as early as age 62 or as late as age 70. Now, your full retirement age will be somewhere age 67 to 66 to 67, depending on the year that you were born. In this example, it's someone who has a full retirement age of age 67. So if your full retirement age is 67, if you claim benefits as early as age 62, then you have a 30% haircut in benefits. So that claiming 5 years early, you're going to get a 30% reduction in the benefits. In this example, $1,500 is that benefit based on the full retirement age at age 67. You can see that the benefit at age 62, if this person claimed then, would only be $1,050. By contrast, if this person, instead of claiming at full retirement age, if this person delayed out to age 70, there would be 8% addition to the benefit every year, or 24% over those 3 years. So you can see that benefit would be $1,860 if that person delayed out until age 70. So there's a 77% difference from that age 62 benefit all the way out to age 70. Now, of course, nobody knows when they're going to pass away. So that makes this more complicated than it could be otherwise. But as we look at it, we come back to some base statistics. And this is what the Social Security Administration has published. You can see at age 62, if we look at the likelihood of a gentleman to live out to age 67, there's a 93% chance when we look at the broad population, the average of everybody. If you're 62 as a gentleman, that you will live out to age 67. There's a 87% chance that you'll live to 70, a 70% chance that you'll live to 77, and finally a 57% chance that you live to 81. You can see all the way out to age 90, a 22% chance. Now, this is the general population, and I've had some in-depth conversations with actuarials that do statistical analysis for life insurance companies, and their input to me, or their feedback to me, has been that for the folks that generally have a higher level of education, a higher level of wealth, and a higher level of access to healthcare, that we should add about 5 years onto our life expectancy on average. So if we look at this, we could say, okay, folks getting out into their early 80s, instead of there being maybe a
57% chance of surviving to 81, we look to
age 77 probability of 70% for gentlemen. Now, that's an imperfect call there, but I think that we're really doing ourselves a disservice if we only think about a 57% likelihood of getting to age 81 for individual gentlemen. If we look at the ladies, tend to live a little bit longer. If we look at the statistics there out to age 67, if they're 62, it's 96% probability that they'll live to 67, 92% probability that they'll live to 70, an 80% probability that they'll live to 77, and then a 69% probability that they'll live to 81. Now, in a moment, you'll see why we've chosen these particular ages. They may seem random to you for the time being, and then a 1/3 chance of living out to age 90. Now, if we have a married couple, again, those percentages are higher because, again, we have two people If we come back to the ladies living out to age 77, if we add those 4 or 5 years that the actuary had given me feedback that we probably should add on average, if we're thinking about doing projections for our clients based on those different factors, there's probably a high likelihood, maybe 80% or so, that a person who is a single female will get into her early 80s. So a high probability there. Again, nothing is certain, but we want to look and see the statistical elements there. Now, obviously, if we have someone who has a reduced life expectancy based on some illness that they've had or some kind of condition, then we want to alter that accordingly. If we have someone who has excellent health and has significant longevity in his or her family, we also want to maybe add into our projections there. So big picture, we look at the likelihood that an average person who comes to us, who's in our client base, getting into his or her early 80s as being a pretty high likelihood, probably something like 70 to 80%. Now, if we think about a break-even chart here, this gives us an example of a guy named Joe, and his potential of claiming at age 62 or his potential of claiming later on. And you can see that his suggested claiming is actually out at age 70. And we have that earliest claiming option there again at age 62. So what I want to highlight here is the total benefit there on the vertical axis. You can see, of course, if Joe passes away at age 70, the earliest benefit would have given him total income of something like $200,000 over the course of those 8 years. Nothing if he had deferred out to age 70 and passes away right then. You can see each year, though, that the income that he's receiving from that suggested deferral to out to age 70 helps him to kind of catch up a little bit to that earliest benefit, to the point that when he's in his early 80s, when he's something like age 81, he catches up and overtakes that benefit. So what we could say is this break-even chart would suggest that if you get out into your early 80s, it's probably better from a financial perspective, just from an overall income perspective, if you defer. If you pass away prior to around age 81, then it would have been better if you had taken those benefits earlier. Now, if we think about this again and go back to our first slide there about percentages and ages and such, probably something like a 70% chance for gentlemen, something like an 80% chance for ladies to get out to age 81 again among our client base. Now, this doesn't take into account the time value of money in the same way that it could. If we think about this first slide, that we have that break-even chart there, this is assuming that we don't have a discount rate that's being applied. So I'm going to go down to this next chart and say, okay, well, what if we think about time value of money and we start to do some calculation in there? Now, my counsel is always to look at time value of money and be fairly conservative here, because Social Security benefits, they give us a nice steady income. They've historically given us a cost of living adjustment that stayed in line with inflation there. And so that's a nice solid benefit. I don't think that it's appropriate to have a discount rate there that would be consistent with maybe rates of return that you have in stocks. Instead, I think it's more consistent to maybe have a discount rate that might be 3 or 4% on the high side of things, closer to inflation. So if we look at this next chart, what we're trying to do here is show the expected annual rate of return versus expected longevity and show what would be the optimal strategy. So obviously, if you could claim at age 62 and you could get 100% rate of return on those resources every year for the rest of your life, we should claim as early as you can, because you would be deferring out 8 years there and claiming at age 70, and that rate of return would never catch up, because the earlier that you can get it, you're doing something with those funds in an extraordinary way. Now, you can see even out at 10% there that the numbers are going to suggest that you should claim as early as you can. What I would suggest that we look at, though, is an expected annual rate of return that would be fair, that would be something closer to 3%. And if we do that, you're getting out maybe to age 82, 83 as your break-even point. If you go above and beyond that, again, I think that we're not really putting apples to apples in terms of the consistency of the rate of return of Social Security and the expected annual rate of return in our discount rate there. So again, that's why I usually say somewhere in your early 80s would be that break-even point. So we can know this, and we can look at the mathematics. And if we have a client that comes to us and says, well, indeed, I have good health, I have decent longevity in my family, maybe we think that an age of something like 90 would actually be appropriate to plan for this individual. We can say mathematically, it probably makes sense to defer benefits and claim at age 70. But there's also a psychological component here, because we know that deferring those benefits takes a level of discipline. It also takes a level of planning. So we have to know that there are resources, whether they have been saved or whether they continue to work over that period of time. We have to know that there's income enough to be able to provide for that person over that period of time. And that requires that level of discipline, that delayed gratification. You know, Walter Mischel is a famous researcher from Stanford, I think in the 1960s, that did the marshmallow experiment with kiddos, and basically, you know, found that it's very, very difficult for human beings and kids in this particular experiment. He gave them the option that they had a marshmallow that was sitting right in front of them that they could take at any time. He was going to leave the room and come back in 15 minutes. And if they waited to eat that marshmallow for 15 minutes, he would give them another marshmallow. So they would get twice as much if they could defer for 15 minutes. It's a little bit like that in terms of our example here, because we have to have the discipline to be able to defer that income over time, because we're having a higher likelihood that we're going to get an increased level of benefit. And that can be a very significant increase in benefits. There are times that we see someone who maybe our expectation is that good planning would suggest that they'll live into their late 80s or early 90s, where this can be a six-figure decision. This can be a decision that can amount to $100,000 or more in terms of the income that they receive over the course of a lifetime. So it can be very, very significant in terms of the expectation, but there has to be a level of discipline to defer that benefit out to age 70. So we think about this, the mathematics of this, we walk through with clients, but we also talk about the psychology of this. There are times where, you know, if a client has significant health challenges, that it may make sense to claim earlier. There's also times when clients will just simply elect to claim earlier because it gives them a level of confidence that they have that income that they don't have to take from other sources. Now, here's the counterpoint to that. To any client that we walk through this with, I remind them that the outcomes that we see from an investment basis over a 30-year time frame are far wider than the outcomes that we see over a 5-year time frame. So if you use your income, if you use some of the things that you've saved, some of the accounts that you've saved over the next 5 years, we don't exactly know where those accounts will be through that whole 5-year time frame. They'll be up and down a little bit in that time frame. But if we think about it 30 years down the road, then the range of outcomes is far wider there. So if we defer Social Security benefits, that actually means that we're going to be taking more income earlier from our accounts, and we have that level of solidity, or that firmness of income that's at a higher level for Social Security down the road. If we do the opposite, if we take Social Security earlier, then what that means is that we're taking our benefits there. We don't have as much down the road that is certain, but instead we have to take more out from our accounts down the road, and the range of outcomes there is going to be typically broader and more difficult to pin down there if we think about the range of outcomes that might be over the next 15, 20, even 30 years there. So I hope that introduction has provided some context to the decision that you have as an individual filer. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us on this. The next step, certainly if you're working with our team, would be providing that Social Security benefit statement if you've not already done so. And then we'll have a conversation about these different elements and make sure that the choice that you make fits in with the financial plan that we're working together to build.
This content was provided by Retirement Planning Services. We're in Knoxville, Tennessee, and you can visit our website at www.seriousretirement.com. The information in this recording is intended for general educational and informational purposes only and should not be construed as investment advisory, financial planning, legal, tax, or other professional advice based on your specific situation. Please consult with your professional advisor before taking any action based on its contents.